Hey there everybody, Eric from Outer Limitless Blades coming at you today with a question. Which of these three choppers would be the one that you would pick? Now in today's video we are going to look at three choppers, kind of similar in terms of the general characteristics, and I'm saying general, there are some similarities, but at the same time quite a number of differences, and the question is, well, which of these would you pick? And for today's video, we are going to straddle three different price ranges. So here today, the Nedfoss Alaska Machete in the $60 mark, the Odenwolf W Machete in the $90 mark, and HX Outdoors Kangablade in the $110 mark, right around there, depending on where you buy these and availability and some of the features. But generally speaking, all of these in D2 or a variant of D2, all of them with a very similar blade size class. Again, a little bit of variety here, not exactly the same, but we're talking in the same kind of ballpark, same sort of realm. And again, all of these in that chopper class of knives. The Kangablade from HX Outdoors, you could maybe consider in that sort of survival class knife. But all of these are actually really nice. I like these knives quite a bit, and they struck me as a great opportunity to talk about these together, because I think if you were somebody looking for a knife in this type of size class or this general genre, you may come across these. You might ask yourself, well, which one would be the one for me? And I'm starting to develop some thoughts, but I will keep those thoughts to myself because I don't want to influence your thoughts. But what we are going to do is compare these. So I'll show you all of the features and the things about these that compare and contrast. Now, the first one here, again, Nedfoss. Nedfoss is a company that you see a lot on, I'm going to call it more of the folding knife channels. Channels that do cover, obviously, knives, but more specifically, folding models. But they have a lot of excellent fixed blades. Now, I have covered Nedfoss in the past with their throwing axes, and they're okay. They're pretty good. They do a nice job, but they are definitely on the budget side. So if you're somebody looking for a decent blade that's not going to break the bank, Nedfoss might be a fairly good way to go. Now, D2, as I had mentioned, and the overall length here, 16.5 inches. Whereas now, as we get into the Odenwolf W Machete, Odenwolf, another company whose products I have covered in the past, and more specifically, awesome fixed blade, really cool. And their fixed blades, in the quote-unquote W lineup. And so this here being the W Machete, again in D2. The overall length here being 16.75 inches. So right in that same sort of sweet spot. And now here, the Kangablade HX Outdoors. I have seen their products in the past, covered them on my channel, and I visited them at SHOT Show 2025. Now this particular steel here is in DC 53, which is basically, from all the research that I see, calls this a quote-unquote upgrade to D2. It's in that same sort of family of steels, only it can be hardened to a higher Rockwell and should have some pretty good overall characteristics in terms of its durability. Now, this overall length, not quite as long, coming in at 14.25 inches. However, the reason why I include it in this lineup, it's actually, of the three of these knives, it is the heaviest. So it has the most kind of heft and weight, and it definitely falls in that chopper blade size class. And so I kind of felt as though having these three different knives in that chopper class and having three distinct different price points would be a great place to have a discussion. And so again, as we get into it, the Nedfoss, as I mentioned, overall length here being 16.5 inches, the actual blade length 10.5 inches with a 10.1 inch cutting edge. The stock thickness here is 0.22, so it's thicker than a 3/16, but it is thinner than a 1/4 inch. So that leaves this very nimble and feels light in the hands. And as you look here, it's actually an oversized sharpening choil, but you can definitely index on that. Now that will be a little bit sharp on that point right there coming off of the ricasso, but you can do it and you definitely get some good quality control. Now this has that awesome clip point design, so kind of that like Bowie style clip. And the Rockwell here, 59-61 with a high saber grind. And this is going to do a fantastic job for batoning, for limbing, for larger heavy duty camp tasks. But you get that nice big belly there, and you will absolutely have the ability to pound down and do some of those chopping tasks. Now you're not going to get quite as sharp or refined an edge right out of the box, but that's okay. And Nedfoss is doing a nice job with their edge, so it's not terrible, and you can see it's actually pretty even from the tip as you see that shiny secondary bevel all the way down to the sharpening choil. So pretty good job overall, and I have to say I do like this blade shape quite a bit. They offer 3 different shapes, but I liked the clip point where I end up with that very distinct sort of center line point. Still has some stabability and obviously the chopping and batoning, and you should have some pretty good sliceability out of this because it's a high saber grind, so not only will it split wood, but by the time you get down to that secondary edge, it's thin enough you can do some of those finer tasks. But now the W Machete, again in D2, but this is coming in from what I can tell around 61 HRC, so on the upper end there for the D2 scale. Again, 16.75 inches overall, but a 10-inch cutting edge. And not only do you end up with that 10-inch cutting edge, it's actually, I'd say closer to 9.75 because you do end up with that sharpening choil in there. But as you look, notice the light and how it shines there. You have this awesome compound grind. So on the, kind of vast majority of the blade here, you have a standard grind, but then up where it gets tight, it gets a little bit steeper, and that's going to give you excellent carvability. And so as you grip the knife and choke up for those controlled tasks, you'll notice again that compound grind is going to be very slicey right through here where you're controlled. And man, did they put a wicked edge on this knife. This came super razor sharp right out of the box. Very nicely done. Beautiful finish on this particular variant. There are different variants, so you can get more of a coated blade. But personally, for me, I like the satin finish. It's not going to catch much in the way of debris. Looks really great overall. Now, when it comes down to the stock thickness, this is actually a little bit thinner than the Nedfoss, where this is only 0.20, so just over 3/16. And again, that's going to leave this very nimble in the hand and leave it balanced. Feels really good, and you can definitely whip this knife around with precision and confidence. I like that about this. So generally speaking, this is very nice in terms of the blade stock thickness, and of the 3 of these knives, it's actually the lightest of the bunch, even though it's the longest. Which now takes us to the Kangablade. Now, as I mentioned early on, this is the heaviest. That's because we have this real thick 0.28 inch thick stock, so well over 1/4 inch. We're not at 1/3 yet, but we're well over 1/4 inch, so 0.28. Now DC53, as I mentioned, capable of being hardened to a higher Rockwell. I think this is probably above 61. There's a possibility this could be 63 or 64 HRC. DC53 definitely does have the ability to get up there. Now, I don't see any reports from HX Outdoors to tell me exactly what it is, so I can't report on that specifically. But you can see here a beautiful grind, very nicely done, real clean machining. The manufacturing on this knife is fantastic. They did a great job. Real clean lines, excellent overall construction, and very robust and rugged. So the overall blade length here, 8.75 inches. You get a full 8 inches of cutting edge, and then a quality, full, generous finger choil. That's a full inch right there that you can get into, easy for control and balance. And even though this is a heavier blade, very light and nimble, and especially once you choke up. That leaves this very wieldy, capable of doing those more controlled tasks, finer detailed work. And for me, my thumb goes right over onto that scallop and lands right there for very, very controlled action. This is kind of more of a modified clip point design. And so that does give you kind of that, general spear-like experience where the tip is more in line with the center of the handle. So general blade shape, very common to most people, capable of doing some fantastic work. And going back for a minute to the Odenwolf, I'm curious what you guys think about this blade shape. Now, some people will call this a sheep's foot, maybe. Some people will call this a modified Tonto, maybe. I'm not really too sure what you would call that. It does have that lower 1/3 saber grind. So lower 1/3, you can see there for that saber grind. But I'm curious, what's your thought, and what do you call that exact blade shape? I mean, is this kind of in that fro-like, style of a knife? It's just a real cool shape, and you could see this being a crazy wood processor overall. And then again, as we take a look, back at the HX Outdoors, again, high saber grind, 2/3 height. So all of these exhibiting that saber grind, which should give you some excellent wood splitting performance, nice overall length for chopping, good details within the blades to allow you to get close up and do those finer tasks, excellent balance. So that's kind of why you can see I am categorizing these in a similar class and comparing them together. And when it comes down to the handles, again, they are going to vary, and vary quite a bit. With the Nedfoss, you do have that overmolded rubber. It's a bolt-on design. It does have a fully encapsulated guard, and when you get on this, it feels wonderful in the hand. Nice little subtle ramp there, and you can see it has some ribbing along the way, and some design elements along the side that aid in grip. Same with the underneath, so a very positive grip. You end up with that smashing pommel on that butt end, nice lanyard hole. So in terms of the handle here, excellent overall grip. So that does work well. And again, I mentioned you can kind of choke up. The Odenwolf, I love this handle. It is fantastic. Extra length, and definitely working very well, where even though this has a bit of an indexing choil, in a couple of locations, as you grip the knife and get a full grip, I end up with 2 fingers right in that indexing choil, locking in perfectly. 2 more fingers in that indexing choil, and the third kind of lands on that mound. However, fully rounded, sculpted, and comfortable in the handles. Some of that ribbing along the top of the TPE handle. So again, the rubber overmolded or TPE handles. A little bit of grip there, and a nice large oversized lanyard hole. The pommel end, nothing exposed. I would probably personally not do much in the way of smashing there, just because I don't like damaging overmolded handles. I don't think you'd ever have a problem, and I am hoping that over time this does not necessarily slip out. I do like that Nedfoss added these bolts. So that bolt-on design, adding a little bit of security to make sure that handle doesn't necessarily slide out. And I don't have that much experience yet with the overmolded handles on Odenwolf. Hopefully there won't be any problems. I don't expect that there would be. And you do end up kind of with that lanyard tube going all the way through, which I don't know if that goes into the tang of the knife, but I'm hoping there's a hole in the tang of the steel, and then that goes right through, kind of in a way pinning things in place. But again, this handle is awesome. You can get way back and get some good quality chopping power, the ability to do the limbing, and good reach overall. This Odenwolf W Machete is absolutely sweet, and I love the handle. It works very well. And as we get into the HX Outdoors, by far the most rugged, robust, and just gorgeous construction. They did a real nice job with the machining and the manufacturing. Everything is perfectly fit to the tang of the knife. No lips, no edges, not catching any nails on there. So very well lined up. You can see that real thick tang there. And then going into this G10, which has plenty of bolts. So your huge oversized bolt there, and then 4 more working their way down the scales. A little bit of milling and machining in there, and then an exposed pommel leading into a lanyard hole. All in all, very nice, great construction, but in my personal belief, a little bit blocky. It's not going to hurt your hands too bad, but it is a little bit blocky. And considering that you do have dedicated indexing choils, so finger, basically your index finger, middle finger, and then your 2 follow-ups, ring finger and pinky on this side of that hump. And it does work well. The shape is great. The overall fit in the hands, very good. But where this really excels, in my opinion, getting up there for those controlled tasks, this grip is wonderful. And you'll notice it's actually contoured right through here, which lands the meat of your palm right through that section. So it is very comfortable and very controlled. So again, the handle construction on all 3 of these, vastly different, but you do get kind of a different experience. And so which one would you choose? I'm just kind of curious. Which leads me now to the sheaths. Now, Nedfoss going with a very simple leather sheath. It's fine. It does its job. It's okay. I'm not a huge fan of these simple leather sheaths, but it does its job. It's nicely made. It's very basic, but it does what it needs to. And what I really don't like is straps that are in the way, which would potentially force me to put my hands in the way of danger. In order to not cut this strap off, you kind of need to get in here, get that out of the way, and then insert the knife. And you'll see if you let that go, that strap goes right up against that cutting edge. So you need to kind of peel that away as you get the knife in or out of the sheath, which means you're putting your hands in harm's way. Now, one thing I did note is on a couple of these, you can actually take the strap, fold it back, and then buckle it onto itself. I can't quite do that here, which is too bad. So I do suspect that over time, this could be a little bit of a liability, but not a huge deal. It is definitely just something worth considering. So of the 3 of these knives, the sheath probably leaves the most to be desired. Now, the Odenwolf, it's actually a very serviceable sheath. This is simply a molded plastic, but that's okay. It has excellent retention and a decent system here where if you don't want this strap, keep in mind the fact once I put the knife in, I could strap the handle and get additional retention. But I'm just simply going to take this, snap it back and out of the way, which now allows me to get the knife in and out of the sheath without any worry. If I was just carrying this for a basic duty, day in, day out, no problem. Hiking, maybe I would strap that in. But this is more than enough with plenty of solid retention. This knife is not going anywhere there. A little bit of rattle, but you can see. Good grip, nice and solid. It's not going anywhere, so I won't even use that strap. And plenty of lashing points. So a flexible and versatile sheath, it does work well. However, by far, the nicest sheath of all of these, the Kangablade. And you can see why the Kangablade commands a higher price. Comes with a very nice kydex, very well molded. Again, that same strap where if you wanted the additional retention, you could leverage that. I'm simply going to take this and buckle it back out of the way. It's a little bit tighter here, but you can do it. Just snapping that back and out of the way. Still plenty of thickness for your belt to make it through there, no worries. Tan with that black carbon fiber style kydex, really nicely made, excellent rivets. Checking the dimensions here, everything here 1.5 inch standard spacing, and then you end up with some additional lashing up at the top. In terms of the retention, nice click, minimal rattle, really not a lot at all. That blade's not coming out for general use, so if I wasn't going crazy, I would literally just use the kydex without that additional retention strap, and that would work just fine. It is not ambidextrous, however, you could maybe make it work, but you can see here they opted to actually bolt the dangler piece directly onto the kydex, so this is really for the most part right-hand carry. That is also the case for the Nedfoss and for the Odenwolf. So all in all, a couple of really nice blades. Now, to finalize my thoughts, I've already mentioned the weight. Now, although the longest, the Odenwolf is the lightest knife at 19.8 ounces. I did measure these myself, so that's what I'm getting on my scale, which is a little different from the reported weights on the website. The next longest knife here is the Nedfoss. That's right in the middle at 20.8 ounces. The shortest knife, yet the most kind of stout and robust here, the HX Outdoors Kangablade. That's weighing in at 23.6 ounces. So all in all, guys, I hope you enjoyed that. Which one of these would you choose and why? Now, I would go as far as to say, performance will prevail. It's one thing to see these, at the tabletop and discuss the features, but performance will prevail. I am going to say, if I had to make a decision right now based on what I know, I don't know. This Odenwolf is pretty awesome. It's a cool blade. It's really neat. I really like it a lot. I like the features. I like the grind. I like the handle. If I was somebody looking for a little bit more of a premium blade, I would definitely consider the HX Outdoors. Nice in terms of the G10, upgrade in terms of the steel going to the DC53, and there's no doubt that you are going to get a premier ride with the kydex. And I always say a knife is just a knife, but if you can't carry it well, you're going to lose in your user's experience. So when you have a nice kydex or sheath like HX Outdoors Kangablade, you're kind of going to be riding in style. So a couple of considerations there. If you're more budget conscious and want to get yourself started, or maybe you just want a knife to beat on, the Nedfoss, this Alaska machete, it's going to be sweet. It's a great knife, excellent balance, awesome shape. Couple of different ideas in case you want a different blade shape. You can get their other styles, and the sheath is more than serviceable. So any one of these, you really can't go wrong. So thank you guys. I hope you enjoyed that. Look in the description box below. I'll have links to each one of these. You can get your own Nedfoss Alaska blade, Odenwolf W Machete, or HX Outdoors Kangablade, or maybe you get all three. I would suggest it. They're all pretty cool. And with that, enjoy the Outer Limitless family of channels. You're here today on Outer Limitless Blades, all the sharp and pointy things. Outer Limitless, my primary channel, hiking, camping, outdoor experiences. Outer Limitless 2, which is the tactical and firearm side of things. And Outer Limitless Lights, where I cover headlamps, EDC lights, indoor, outdoor lighting, you name it. That's the Outer Limitless family of channels. So thank you again to Nedfoss. Thank you to Odenwolf, and thank you to HX Outdoors for providing these for review. To the rest of you, take care now. I'll see you soon.